Hey guys, Enigmatic Mr. L here to rank the Fire Emblem stats in a tier list. So I think most people would agree not all stats in the Fire Emblem series are created equally. There's certain stats when your unit gets on a level up you're really excited to see, and your others you're more disappointed. So I thought I'd rank them from worst to best. A few disclaimer first, this is going like on average across the entire series. So I may rank one stat higher than the other, and that's true in most games, but in a certain specific game or two, the inverse might be true. With that out of the way, let's just get on with the list. Starting with the bottom, we have Constitution or Build, as it's known in other games. So, what this stat does is it allows you to wield heavier weapons without losing speed. So, if you have a Constitution of 10 and your weapon weighs 10 or less, you don't lose any speed. If it weighs, say, like 12, you'll have -2 effective speed. Now, this is certainly useful, but there's a couple of reasons why I put this last. The first is you can always just get more speed as opposed to having like con. If your unit has like 15 con but 2 speed, so yeah, they're not going to get weighed down, but it doesn't really matter. They can't make the best use of that con. Secondly, the big issue here is that this is the only stat that really has a significant downside for it being too high. And technically, that's true of some other stats, like in certain Fire Emblem games and modes. If your defense is too high or your speed is too high, the enemy won't attack you. But those are very rare, consider as opposed to the situations where you have a unit with a high constitution or build. So most games, like Thracia 776 or the GBA games, your units can rescue a unit if they have a higher build than the unit they're rescuing. So that means like well, if your build is so high, you can't be rescued by other infantry units. Now, mounted units get away, have a different way of doing this. I think in Thracia 776, they're all mounted units are always treated as if they have a 20 build. But in the GBA games, your rescuing potential, if you have a mounted unit, for female units, it's 20 minus their con. For male units, it's 25 minus their con. So if your con is too high, you actually can't rescue as effectively as other units. I think it's meant to emulate like your horse or your Pegasus or whatever. If your character is lighter, they can have an easier time picking up a second passenger. So this just means that high con units can't be rescued, and high con like flyer units or cavalry units, they can't rescue as effectively as units with lower con or a lower build. Also, this is kind of like situationally use thing, but in Thracia 776, you actually want like a unit or two with low con, at least in some situations, to like offer them up as capture bait. This is why like Laura is kind of good in the Manster section because you can just offer up unit, take off her all of her equipment. The unit will come and rescue her, quote unquote rescue or kidnap her, and then their stats will be reduced and you can have an easier time taking them out. Not a terrible class or not a terrible stat, I'd say. That's why I didn't make like an F tier. Generally speaking, you get body rings in games. They can improve your con by 2. And I generally use them as opposed to selling them. If there's a certain unit that's like right on the edge of being like weighed down by certain weapons I'd like to use, but I definitely say it's the worst stat of the bunch. Next, I would say is resistance. This might be surprising to some people. A lot of people probably expect luck or maybe skill to be there, which we'll get to those very shortly. But I honestly think that, excluding more common stats you see like on level up, res is actually the worst stat. Now, don't get me wrong, you generally speaking might probably want to have like one unit or two with a high amount of resistance. As much as like the term mage killer is like memed on in the Fire Emblem community, and I think for good reason, it still can be useful to have like one Pegasus Knight or Falcon Knight or something like that to deal with the occasional group of magical enemies. But there's a few reasons why it's ranked as low as it is. You might think that it's basically just the magical equivalent of defense, which is generally considered to be a good stat, so it should at least be close. But there's a few reasons why I'd say not. First of all, generally speaking, magical enemies are much rarer than they are than like physical enemies. You can go like certain maps, you'll see few, if any, of them. Second of all, generally speaking, magical enemies, they have like low HP and low defense, so they can like easily be one shot. Like even though your armor knight, say, is like vulnerable to because it's like terrible resistance to the mage knights, you can just attack them on player phase and just like one shot them. Thirdly, is the fact that there's many ways of just like augmenting resistance. Certain weapons like genealogy, like the Tyrfing and the Missile Tang grant resistance, but much more commonly you have like Pure Waters and the Min Staff, which grant temporarily 7 resistance dimensions by 1 each turn. So in the rare situations where you are fighting like a group of magical enemies, you can just pop one of those on there and the unit will be fine. Some might say resistance is useful because a higher amount of resistance makes you less likely to be affected by status saves, or in certain games, just outright immune if your resistance is higher than the enemy's magic stat. I would say yes, that is useful. That is something, but also if you just have restore staff, it really doesn't matter. Again, it's not a terrible stat. Like I said, generally speaking, I do want to have like 1 or 2 units that do have a good amount of resistance, but beyond that, you generally don't see much use out of that. Moving on to the C tier skills. First up, I have skill. The exact specifics of how this works varies a little bit by game to game, but generally speaking, 1 point of skill equals a 2 point in hit, which isn't a lot, but you can add up over like enough skill level ups. Generally speaking, a big reason why this isn't considered impactful as of other stats is because a lot of your hit percentage is determined by the weapon itself. Like weapons like, say, Bridget's UFL and Genealogy Holy War have like a base 70 accuracy, so it's just shaky accuracy, but then in mini games, swords are accurate, so even a unit with like middling to low skill, they're not going to have a difficult time hitting the enemy. And that's true, but a good amount of skill can add up, make things more reliable. Especially if you're Iron Manning, the devastation can be when you miss attack, you really need to land that costs you a unit. In book 1 of Mystery of the Emblem, I lost Minerva because she missed like a 97% attack, give or take 1%. I don't remember, but if I just used like a secret book on her, she would have survived the end of that Iron Man. So that's something. But even if you're not Iron Manning, you generally don't want to like lose your units, because then you have to like press on without them if you didn't care about them, or you have to reset if you really want to keep them around, redo the map again. So just having a bit of extra reliability helps. Also, in more modern Fire Emblem games, there's a number of skills tied to skill. So, and some of these, you can end up suffering for some success. Like, I think the meta of Fire Emblem Fates is you actually want unequipped skills like Dragon Fang, because they allow you to like, when they trigger, they can potentially prevent you from charging up your shield gauge faster, suffer success. But there's other skills like Soul, which you can't always rely on them, but when they do activate, they're always going to be good. Like restoring HP, there's pretty much no situation that's going to be bad. You might be running a low like HP build, like you want something like Wrath Vantage, but if that's the case, you're not going to have Soul on the unit. So just a little bit of extra reliability, I think, puts it above these two. Next, we have luck. I'm sure many people would expect luck to be like at the bottom, maybe like here-ish so. I don't think it's that impactful, but I do think it is good, or generally speaking, better than these two. The thing about luck is you at least want a little bit of it. There are diminishing returns on it, to be sure. Like, generally speaking, the numbers vary, but something like less than 5 luck or less, you notice it's like it's a bad amount of luck. Then it takes like 25 or higher luck, you notice, oh, that's a lot of luck. And then between 5 and 25 luck, there's really not much of a difference. The big thing luck grants is on minigames, it grants crit avoid. And again, especially if you're Iron Manning, like how like the panic attack you see when like the enemy has like a single digit crit on you. And again, even if you're not Iron Manning, but you're trying to like, keep your units alive, you generally don't want to risk that single digit crit. You especially notice the units that like say Saul in the Binding Blade. Generally good, has good like C rank staff. You can promote him. Generally good combat, good speed. But that low luck. I remember in the last like Binding Blade Iron Man, I was always hesitant whenever I had to use them and he faced enemy attacks. There was that single digit crit. And I was like, anyone else can do this? What Saul's about to do? Also, like skill, there's a number of skills in the newer Fire Emblem games tied to luck. Like, for example, Arms Thrift. If you get a unit with enough luck, they can use really good weapons without depleting him. That requires a good amount of luck, but it's still something. The big reason it's on here is, like I said, for the crit avoid. After a few points of luck, there's really like big diminishing returns on it. But just to avoid those single digit crits, I think it earns it a spot higher than these two. And last, for the C tier skills, I'm going to go with Charm. This is a stat that's only in Fire Emblem 3 houses and affects the accuracy of gambits and how well you can dodge them. This is a big reason why units like your Lords and Byleth are so good. When the enemy uses like a gambit against you, you really don't want to be hit by it. You'll face a stat penalty and you can't move on the next turn. But then someone like Dimitri or someone only face like a 20% hit, basically just wasting the enemy's turn. That's very useful. Same thing of like landing them, especially in the early game. I think like Dorothea can potentially get like Rally Charm pretty early on, or as if you raise it per authority rank, and that can be useful especially in the early game when a lot of your attacks, and especially gambits, are having like difficulty landing. But at the end of the day, it is just like these other two. They all three of these, all the skills in C tier, they improve reliability, but they don't really help you meet any like certain thresholds, like enough speed to double or avoid getting double, enough strength to one round, enough magic to have a certain amount of range on your rescue or your warp, enough defense and HP to survive multiple rounds of combat against an enemy. This just adds a bit more reliability, and that is good. There's also just the fact that you're not going to be using gambits 24/7, nor is the enemy going to be using them on you. In situations where you just attack the enemy and then attacks you, charm doesn't enter into play. Um, Still useful, like you want like a few units with good charm for those like to dodge gambits or to like land your gambits, but it is just like reliability more than meeting thresholds. All right, next I would say HP or hit points. This stat, I would say it's better than these, but you need a higher amount to really notice a difference. Like I think it's telling in most Fire Emblem games when you have your stat boosting items, most of them increase like 2, but HP increases by like 5 or 7. There are exceptions, of course, but generally speaking, 1 point of HP isn't really going to make nearly as impactful a difference as like 1 point or 1 or 2 points in some of these other stats. Now, of course, there are exceptions. I've had a unit survive by 1 HP as well. If they got 1 HP, let's level up, they'd be dead right now. But generally speaking, when you have a good amount, HP is a stat like you want to see it on level ups, but a single point of it you're not really excited for, but you still want your units to get HP on a good amount of their level ups to give them a more bulk. Generally, I would say HP has a better return on investment than resistance for the reason I mentioned previously, such as like the rarity of the general rarity of magical enemies. It's not as good as defense, which we'll get to, but a good amount of HP can really help you against magical enemies and physical enemies, help you survive hits you otherwise wouldn't. But you do need a higher amount of it to really see a difference than some of these other stats, which is why it's ranked lower than them. Next, I'm going to go with weapon level. This is basically just like weapon rank, except it's in Shadow Dragon, the Blade of Light, and Mystery of the Emblem. The first game in the series and the third game. I'm not super familiar with either of those games. The first 3 Fire Emblem games are the only games I've only played once. Every other Fire Emblem game I played at least twice. So, yeah, give or take this one a little bit, but I think somewhere in B tier is fine. Basically, you have in those games, you have a chance to increase your weapon level and level up, just like other stats. And when your weapon level is a certain amount, you can wield certain weapons, like the Silver Sword or the Silver Lance. This is a big reason why, Jagan is so useful, especially early game. You can use the Silver Lance or Sheeta. I think like once she joins or soon after she joins, she can use the Silver Lance to make up for low strength, which is really good. It's not higher because once you reach a certain amount, it really doesn't matter if you get it or not. Like once you're using the weapons you want to use, like it doesn't really matter if you get another like weapon level or 2 or 3 or so. And you could say that's true of the other ones, other stats as well. Like once you have enough speed to double or enough like strength to one round, doesn't matter. But the enemy stats are going to vary and tough. Like you might have enough speed to double most enemies, but additional speed will help. Not enough strength to one round most enemies, but additional strength help. Weapon level is like, are you using the weapons you want to use? Yes. Okay, then additional weapon level generally does nothing. It is a good stat. You want to get to a certain level, the weapon level to a certain level, but after that, there's big diminishing returns. And rounding out the B tier, I have magic, a very offense-oriented stat. With enough magic, you can one-round enemies, or at least do significant amount of damage, maybe a big chip damage, so another unit can finish them off. There's also just the fact of, in games like Thracia 776, or like the Arcanea games, Warp and Rescue have infinite range, but in many other games, like the GBA games or Three Houses, how much distance you get with like Rescue and Warp is tied to your magic stat. The exact calculations vary, but it could be something like magic divided by 2. So enough magic to reach those thresholds is really good. A few reasons why it doesn't quite reach A tier, in my opinion, even though like something like Strength will. There's a few reasons for that. One is generally speaking, as I mentioned with resistance, a lot of magical oriented classes have low HP and defense. And so to make up for that for your units, a lot of enemies just have low resistance as well. So you don't need as much magic to do a significant damage as you do strength. Like I said, kind of like diminishing returns kind of thing. There's also the fact of some units that use magic, they're just strictly healers. And yeah, healing up more HP can be nice, but also in certain situations, like if you're doing, say, like a ranked run in Genealogy of the Holy War, you actually want like less magic on your healers because they can like heal twice and get more experience, that sort of thing. That's nice. Not if their unit they're not using like warp rescue and they're not like attacking. Generally speaking, just healing. It's not nearly as impactful to have more magic as opposed to like a unit that's a mage fighting or like a unit with strength fighting. It's not nearly as impactful. Lastly, there are a good number of classes that have both strength and magic, as opposed to like the GBA games where it's merged into one stat. And most of those classes, most of those units, they only care about one or the other. Usually, it's going to be strength. They're more strength oriented. Like when they get magic, it's like yeah, there might be some magic swords, but you're generally not going to be using them. Like for example, in genealogy, if Sigurd levels up magic, that's not really gonna make a difference. You're mostly just having him using like his steel sword originally, the silver sword, maybe like a brave sword. Um, so it's just generally not as impactful. Hence why it's like it's good. It's a B tier, top tier, but not as good as these. And moving on to the A tier, this is the really good stuff. Starting with defense, it doesn't help you reach like one rounding thresholds, enough speed to double, enough strength to knock them out. But surviving enemy attacks is really nice. If you have like 20 HP and the enemy's dealing 10 damage to you, you're going to ride 2 rounds of combat. 2 rounds of combat. But just 2 points of defense, or just one level up in defense. Either use like a Draco shield, or you level up defense. Now you're surviving 3 rounds of combat. Whereas opposed to like HP, you can use like Seraph Robe, add 7 HP. You're still dying in 3 rounds of combat. So a little bit of defense helped a lot more than HP. And take it a step further, add like 10 HP to a 20 HP unit. Now you're still dying 3 hits, but add T10 defense to that unit, and they take 0 damage. Taking 0 damage from most enemies or very little damage, allowing like to choke points, or just take on large swarms of enemies at once, or even if you're just kind of picking off units like bit by bit, slowly moving on units. Having the ability to survive is really good. Generally speaking, there's a much higher return on defense than there is for HP. So I think it's good. Not as good as these two or these few. Next up, I would say is strength. Similar to magic, good like offense stats, allows you to meet one-shotting thresholds or one-rounding thresholds. Much more common than magic. Enemies generally have higher defense than resistance, so you need more strength. Most of your units are probably going to be more physical oriented. And that's just a slight bonus. Certain games, like in Three Houses, and I want to say like the DS Arcanea games, which don't have a constitution and build, your ability to wield weapons is in part determined by strength. So enough strength, you won't get weighed down by weapons, or at least not as much. This means even like on units like a mage or so, who's never been using physical weapons, getting strength on them, though rare, it's still beneficial. So just really nice. Not nice, nearly as nice though as speed, I would say. Um, Main thing about speed is just the fact that enough speed allows you to double enemies, or enough speed on like slower characters allows you to not get doubled. This is why, for example, like you say compare like a cavalry unit to like an armor knight unit. Even though the armor knight unit has higher strength and higher defense, the cavalry unit will like likely outperform them enough speed because uh the armor knight unit might be dealing, say, like 8 damage or so, but they only hit once. Whereas the cavalry unit, they'll only deal 5 damage, but hit twice, dealing 10 damage. Same thing with defense. Let's say like the cavalry unit, they take 6 points of damage. The armor knight only takes 4, but they're getting doubled, so they're still taking more damage. As with like a good amount of stats, once you have enough speed that you're doubling, or slower units that are like never going to double, enough speed to not get doubled, there are drastically diminishing returns. Like, yes, additional points of speed help you increase your evasion, but generally speaking, in most farm games, dodge tanking isn't that reliable. There are exceptions. Certain builds you can do to make your unit like nearly unhittable. But generally speaking, the reason why speed is so high is to double and avoid getting doubled. Last, definitely not least, the one true S tier is movement. Hands down, the best stat, no questions asked. Having enough movement allows you to just like completely one turn maps. It's like, yeah, things like warp and rescue and like dance and stride that can help, but also just having a unit with like high movement, kind of reach the boss, kill them, clear the map in like one turn for like certain kill boss maps, or even if you're not doing one turn, allows you to clear the map in a fewer number of turns. And you might be thinking, well, what if I'm not an LTCer? No, that's fair. I'm not one either, but generally speaking, clearing maps quickly is the easiest way to clear them. You don't have to, like, certain maps have at a certain turn, you have, like, enemy reinforcements, especially games that have, like, ambush spawns. You really want to, like, be out of their way. One way to do that is to just have enough movement. It also helps you with side objectives, like you need to get to that village before a brigand destroys it. You need to get to that NPC before they enemy kills them, so you know have enough movement. This is a big reason why classes like Wyvern Lords and Paladins are considered like the best classes overall across the series, just because of their like balanced stats and a very high movement. I think it's telling there's only one game where you can level up movement, and Thracia 776. So you have like most units have like a single digit chance to level up movement. And if you played that, you know how impactful that can be. Like once your unit levels up movement, it's like, okay, welcome to the team. I'm going to start using you like in a lot of maps. And it was so overpowered that it never came back. Also in a game like say Binding Blade, where you can just buy stat boosters. The optimal stat most people do is like once you get to like chapter 21, it's like spell all their weapons and items they're not using and spend all of their gold on just boots. Have like a huge amount of units with like a huge all of their like main units have a huge amount of movement. It's insane. It's ridiculous. It's overpowered. Movement always opens up like more options. There's not like diminishing returns on it. More movement always helps. Definitely the best stat in the game, or best stat in pretty much every game. And that is my list. Any stats you think I feel underrated or overrated, please feel free to let me know in the comments below. Thank you so much for watching. This is Enigmatic Mr. L, signing out.